Today we're going to talk about an important and emerging aspect of health and brain function, which is your gut microbiota. These trillions of life forms can influence your personality, appearance, and intelligence. And this is a key aspect of plant-based medicine. There's some interesting research that caught my attention. It was the use of fecal transplants for colitis. People who live with colitis are living half a life. They grow weak and thin and can never be far from an available toilet, or else it's literally a nightmare come true. At first, I have to admit, I thought the idea of taking poo from one person and putting it up someone else's rectum seemed like a really bad idea. It's certainly nothing your mother would approve of under normal conditions. Fecal transplants either go via the reverse poop process, a term I just coined, or, I kid you not, swallowing capsules filled with shit. I have to admit, I wasn't very open-minded when I first heard of this. I shook my head because it seemed that the American diet had gotten so severely out of order that people were literally eating poop to make up for it. The idea of this is taboo. I mean, it's taboo universally. It's one of those big taboos right up there with incest. You don't stuff yourself with other people's poop, and you don't gobble it up. But then I saw the effective rate and the cost of it. For colitis, the success rates are over 80%, and the time it takes to take effect is as little as a couple of hours. This is nothing to laugh at. Then I considered that there are people with severe depression, burnout, bipolar disorder, and all of these mental disorders are associated with unique microbial profiles. Those who are obese and diabetic also have unique mixtures of microbiota. This caught my attention because there are herbal formulas used to treat schizophrenia for hundreds of years in China, and they're made up mostly of digestive herbs. Could these herbs be working through the gut-brain axis, and could it be possible for a fecal transplant to be a game changer for those suffering mental illnesses as well? I contacted a classmate from way back, and I mean way back. We had biology together in high school, then AP biology. She went on to become a microbiologist with an emphasis in infectious diseases. She works in a hospital helping many patients with colitis using fecal transplants. I'm very excited to hear her experiences with it. She's treating people in the hospital, and I'm really curious to find out whether, anecdotally, she's seen any changes in personality or weight gain or weight loss, and to just really get her perspective on how this works clinically. Because I came into it with my own biases. I thought the idea was ridiculous. Looking deeper into it, it seems like this is something that could potentially be a game changer for many diseases. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Amy Christie, known by her friends as Bunny. Could you tell us a bit about fecal transplants?
Sure, I'd love to talk about fecal transplants. So part of my job in healthcare working at our local hospital is infection control and working with the doctors and nurses to find some alternatives to treating Clostridium difficile infections. They're usually the main cause of colitis that we see in our hospital anyway. Typically, when a patient comes in, they'll have several bouts over a couple of weeks of time or a couple of months of time in which they've had several bouts of colitis, and the doctor usually tries traditional antibiotic therapy. And if we're talking about fecal transplants, it's an alternative to using some type of antibiotic. Most of the time, the antibiotic isn't useful. It might kill the C. difficile, but since we have it naturally in our guts, eventually it'll just come back. And when our regular flora in our guts has been compromised because of diet or because of antibiotics or other lifestyle choices, then the C. difficile can flourish again and make us ill. And so an alternative to an antibiotic then would be a fecal transplant. So if you've never heard of a fecal transplant, you're essentially taking stool and replacing it back into the colon. And what's really great is that there's different opportunities and different ways we can go ahead and instill that material into your colon. The particular method we use at the hospital that I work for is an actual instilling process. We purchase the fecal matter from a company, and the reason we do that is because it already comes in a homogenized container. It's already been screened for any bloodborne pathogens. It has a wide variety of different organisms. So that's an upside of purchasing from the company. But you can, and I got to do it when I was in the lab, you can take fecal matter from family members and go ahead and make a slurry of your own, just with like normal saline. But then you run the risk of, if they've already have pathogens, or if they have any bloodborne pathogens, or sometimes they do talk about incompatibility. You don't usually see that occur just because it is fecal material. But there have been some times where people will end up becoming ill from their family members' fecal matter. Mm-hmm. So what we do then is we take the material, it's about 500 cc's of liquid stool, and we insert a Foley catheter into the rectum, and we do instill it very slowly and with syringe so that we can control and speak to the patient as they're laying there. So we have them lay on their side. The reason we do it slowly and we don't have it automated is just because, like I said, we can really talk to the patient, see how they're feeling, see if they have any urges to use the restroom, because you really want that fecal matter to be in their colon. If you look at the manufacturer we purchase from, they'll say a couple of hours if you can, but ideally we try to shoot for about an hour of time. So during that hour of time, then once we have it all instilled, we cap off the catheter so it doesn't come back out. And then we literally turn the patient. We have them sit up. We have them roll over. We assist them. We try to essentially coat your colon with that fecal material. And ideally, like I said, we want them to hold it for an hour. But some people will have the urge, especially as they get a little older and their sphincter muscles don't work as well. They sometimes do have the urge to use the restroom, and so we do allow them. But like I said, the longer we can have them hold it, the better. Another option, if you don't want it instilled rectally, is that you can capsulate the fecal material into a vegetable capsule. You can use freeze-dried fecal material. You can use the liquid stool. But we do have patients that do complain that when they burp, they will taste it.
It seems like it would be a very messy process to make those capsules.
Yes, it's not as easy as dropping a couple droppers of, an oil or something else into a capsule. It's, and like I said, the sample that we purchase from, is already pre-made and very easy to draw into the syringe, whereas trying to get 500 cc's into capsules would be a lot of capsules to have to swallow. So,
my understanding with the microbiome is that it tends to be largely influenced mother to child. If people are choosing to, go with a family member, does it matter, or does it seem to matter if it's on the mother's side or on the father's side? I know that genes from the father's side will also influence what grows there, so just curious.
Right. Oh, that's a great question, Andy. And what I've actually learned is that because our mother leaves that imprint in our cells anyway because of her mitochondrial DNA, that we do tend to have gut more like mother. It doesn't necessarily matter which family member. It really depends on which family member has the diet and the past history, the past medical history that we're looking for. So when we're looking at actual family members, which doesn't happen very often because most people don't necessarily want to step up and be the donor. But what we look for is somebody who has a variety in their diet, that they also have a past medical history with with very low track record for disease. We look to also make sure that that person has been updated on all of their vaccines and they've been vaccinated appropriately over the years, because they'll also carry some antibody with them. In particular, if we were to have, we've not had a young child having colitis that's come in from C. difficile infections. They usually still have pretty good immunity to fight off any infection. But if we did, I would highly recommend the mother of the child before I would choose any other family member. We have a lot of older people that come in, and it's usually the spouse. They usually have the same diet, they usually have the same lifestyle, they usually have the same kind of habits. And for the most part, they have the same sort of immunity.
When people have had colitis for a number of years, the colon can get pretty chewed up. Oftentimes I've seen patients and they, just get it taken out, or a section of it taken out, I should say. And it works out very well sometimes not. At what point do fecal transplants not do the job?
Well, right now, industry and scientific evidence are showing that for most people, most average adults that have a fecal transplant, they're seeing 80 to 90% efficacy after the transplant. I suppose it would be individualized, and it would depend on how often you fail that treatment. Of course, taking a piece of the colon is really a conservative measure for most physicians, I would think. And even though we perform it at our hospital, we definitely wait to see how long they have good results after that fecal transplant before that's decided.
Okay, fair enough. With all of the increasing evidence on the interaction between the human gut microbiome and just about every physiological process in the body, what are some of the more unusual results you've seen as a result of somebody having a fecal transplant?
I haven't seen personally, out of the patients that we've had come through and have this fecal transplant, I haven't seen very many that don't seem to be themselves afterwards. But I have read studies before where people will begin to diet differently. I think part of it is because they feel better. Since they don't have an inflamed colon, they're able to digest better because they have replaced poor microbiota with healthy microbiota that are actually doing their job and aiding in digestion. And so I've read before that people will change their diet significantly because they no longer desire certain things that we shouldn't have in our diet: high amount of sugar, high amount of carbohydrates. They stick to a more traditional paleo diet. So, but as far as the patients that we've had and that we've seen, they don't seem to tell me any differently that they've had anything change in their lives aside from feeling better.
Have you noticed any differences with weight loss? I know some people are giving it a go in an attempt to lose weight. Would you, based on what you've seen and read, would you recommend that or not?
I would not recommend it for a weight loss substitute. But there is an upside, of course, to having that for some of the people. Sometimes the people that come in, especially with a C. difficile infection and have the colitis, although we think, well, they have diarrhea, so they're obviously losing weight, a lot of times their bodies respond totally the opposite and are trying to hold on to any sort of fluid, and then they can't get rid of that toxin, they can't get rid of normal fluid and replenish it appropriately, and so they actually do retain some weight. And so we do have some people, once their colon has been healed and they no longer have that inflammation, their body is actually able to process normally, get rid of toxins normally, flush appropriately, and function like it should. And so we do have some people that, but it's not something significant, It's not like some people like, I would love a pill or something I could take and tomorrow I'd wake up 50 pounds lighter. It's nothing like that. It's more of like a LASIK effect for some people, maybe a couple of pounds and then they're back to baseline.
Great. Is it being used at all for problems of the endocrine system? Like diabetes, I'm thinking.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. And I'm actually trying to think if I've read anything, but it wouldn't surprise me if some physicians did think of a fecal transplant even before insulin, just because that replenishing of those organisms, of those good organisms, really can help people that are really on that borderline between type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And so we have not used it for that method in our health system yet, but I wouldn't be surprised. And like I said, I'm trying to think of some scholarly articles that I've come across, but none that come to mind right at this minute.
Okay, so if it's possible, it's still probably pretty young to be accepted as a go-to.
Acceptance is actually a really great word to use, Andy, because right now, when you say fecal transplant, and I bring it up with patients and their family members, most of them are no way. Just because I think when people think of poop, they think of it in a poor light, instead of being something really, really basic and really easy to use to fix a problem that some of these patients have had for years and that are so chronic now that you say fecal and they get really worried and want an antibiotic, because that's what a lot of people want. They want that antibiotic, they want the quick fix, and really just trying to teach them that mindset that, I know this process sounds gross. It's only going to take us about an hour and a half, the whole process is, and then you go home like normal and you shouldn't have any problems after. So it's really about acceptance.
Yeah, what I've always mentioned to people is, yes, I know it sounds weird, but go ahead and find anything else out there that's first of all that quick to administer with that kind of success rate and at this cost. And I don't think there's anything else remotely coming close to it.
Absolutely. And so far, the patients that we've had come in, their insurances have covered it. They do find it medically necessary because they have exhausted all of their antibiotic choices, all of their other choices before going to something more of having an actual colon procedure done where they remove pieces of the colon. For the most part, like I said, that's like a very extreme end, and most people want to exhaust all the resources first before they have a major surgery. We've had such successful patients, only 2 that I can think of that have had more than one fecal transplant. Other than that, the rest of the patients have had success. Part of success comes that they do have to think about their diet change after they've had the transplant done. Just because some people will get back into that lifestyle and they will end up feeding the C. difficile or other organisms in their intestinal tract that really are kept in check by all the other microbiota. We do provide education with them once they leave about, eating healthy and having good exercise and making sure they're maintaining a proper fluid level, and also the pH of their own body and how to recognize those some of those symptoms before they start having colitis.
What kind of general advice do you give people who have colitis, have gone through the procedure, and then afterwards aren't wanting to backslide into the position that they were in before?
Right. So one of the things that we definitely talk with them about are their different options about probiotics and what they need to be taking once they go home. So at our house, we like to call them poop pills. So that's what I tell my children. Did you take your poop pill tonight? So I literally say that to our patients. I say, now when you go home, you're going to need to take a poop pill, and everybody has a good laugh. And I remind them that that probiotic is so essential because we don't get everything we need necessarily for microbiota from just our daily intake of calories and the things that we eat. And so we need to make sure that we are still getting some of those organisms into our intestines. And so we talk about probiotics, we talk about the delivery of the probiotics and, capsulated form versus something like yogurt or, some different methods. And once we talk about the probiotics and really making sure that those are on board, then we talk about a variety in their diet. So the variety is really important to make sure we're introducing just that good atmosphere for those bacteria, so that all of the bacteria that are keeping the more harmful bacteria in check, we want to make sure we're feeding them appropriately and that we don't have too much sugar, too much carbohydrates, things that bad bacteria seem to like. So we talk about that, and really just making sure that we're talking about 5 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, making sure you're getting 8 glasses of water every day, making sure that you're filling that need for your gut. And really also paying attention to your symptoms of your gut. If you become ill because of, let's say, the stomach bug, okay, you get hit with some gastroenteritis, that you're replenishing things that you've lost. So you're making sure that you're getting enough electrolyte back in and that you're trying to help your gut heal instead of harming it further by not replacing what you've lost. Mm-hmm. So we talk about what to do if you've become ill for other reasons. And so we've talked about probiotics, we've talked about diet, and then we talked to them about exercise and really making sure that we are helping our gut with just that natural movement by making sure that we're getting the physical activity every day. And I think sometimes, especially older patients, think, well, there's nothing I can do more besides go out and walk. But we do talk to them about simple stretching and more even like Pilates and yoga movements to help making sure that they are getting their gut stretched out enough and really helping it to push things along and to go with natural movement. So that's the advice that we give and the education that we give. And we do try to discourage them from using the fecal transplant as an alternative to a healthy lifestyle. So really discourage them from going back home, falling into the same old routines, and then coming back to see us in a couple of months with colitis again.
Fair enough. How does exercise affect the gut? Does it influence the peristalsis, the wave-like motions that go through the digestive tract?
Yes, absolutely. So what we find, I think, especially for anybody that's had an animal, I like to think of our dog that we used to have. You'd get to walking and you'd be about halfway along the path and he'd need to use the bathroom. And then by the time we got home, he really needed to use the bathroom. He was just a little dog, and so it didn't take very long for his own intestines to pump through and have that motion. And it's really the same for people. Getting up in the morning and stretching actually starts to help already bring your metabolism up in the morning and start warming it up. And so it's the same thing after you've had this fecal transplant. You need to make sure you're getting enough exercise in the day to help with the natural motion, the peristalsis, and especially after you've eaten, it's really good to just go out and get a little bit of exercise, even if it's 15 minutes. If you're at work and you have a break, it's really great to just get up and walk around and try to do that hourly, especially if you have a day job in which you sit a lot. So we really encourage patients to get up and move around as often as they can, because that will also aid so that things don't get bogged down in your intestinal tract.
Such a good point. There's a Chinese expression. It's kind of like a tongue twister. And it basically goes that if you take 100 steps after you eat, then you live to 99.
All right.
But, yeah, it's basically just get up and walk around. That's the tradition. After dinner in China, everyone's on the streets walking. It's just your after dinner walk. Everyone does that. So I would love to see that in the United States. It's obviously harder if you're snowed in winter, but
right.
What do people do if they're snowed in? It's in the Midwest and it's winter.
Well, living in South Dakota, I know I feel that pain. I happen to have a treadmill, that I just flip down then and walk. But really, even just simple getting up around the house and doing different activities than you think of, stretching out in your doorway, deciding to vacuum, dusting, where you're moving your body and really making sure you're just getting some activity and stretching and really trying to walk around and keep the juices flowing, so to say.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I was curious about your take on foods with antibiotics and how that may affect the gut. There's a lot of very extreme positions that I've seen, people writing about or talking about, and I was just curious what your position was on that.
Sure. So my own personal position is that the least we can use, the better. So the less we can use antibiotics in our daily living, the better. And I know that's really hard for me as a healthcare professional, and then also just as an infection control practitioner, because that's something that I'm trying to do, is prevent infection. But something that I teach people is that organisms are way smarter than we are, and they always have been, and they always will be. They can pick up extraneous DNA very quickly from the environment, from other organisms around them, and they swap DNA just like it's an everyday activity for them. And so it's very easy for them to insert that into their plasmids and to use different DNA combinations to outsmart us. And so if we think every time we have a little sniffle or every time we don't feel very good, we just automatically bother the doctor about an antibiotic, it's not necessarily the right path. And I do tell people that there is a definite place for antibiotics in our life and when we absolutely need them. But scientific evidence right now, this is a perfect example, is that children, I've got 2 kids of my own, and I remember they had the worst problems with ear infections. And so, of course, I would take them to the doctor, it seemed every other month, and they would prescribe them an antibiotic. And of course that made me feel better as a mother, because they would feel better in a few hours, they would be back to their normal selves. But the problem really was in their body and their eustachian tube, because they were just such little people, but their eustachian tube was so small it couldn't clear its own infection. And so scientific evidence right now is showing that kids that take an antibiotic for their ear infection is really no different than if they were taking a placebo. Wow. And so what we really have to remember is that there are alternatives out there besides antibiotics. Antibiotics in our food, let's say feeding our beef. That's something common in South Dakota, feeding cows and our cattle antibiotics in order to make the meat better. And so it's something we have to remember, that while farmers are doing it not to harm us as individuals, but that's how they earn a profit, is by bringing to market the best meat they possibly can. So we have to look for other alternatives in our agricultural industry. In our food industry, we need to look for different alternatives besides using antibiotics to, fatten animals, putting pesticides and different chemicals on plants to keep them away from bugs. We need to look at different alternatives. Just like we do in healthcare, we have to look at different alternatives to antibiotic use. So the government actually, if you are qualified for Medicaid and Medicare to get reimbursement, and our hospital does, so we actually are required in October to have an antimicrobial stewardship program in place. And so we actually are ahead of the curve. We've been working on that for about 2 years, and what's best for our facility. The nice thing is that the government leaves it open, kind of a gray area, so that each facility is able to tailor that to their need, because some facilities are huge and some, even rural health clinics are very small. And so you've got the in-between facilities as well. And so places need to come up with, we need to start looking at different ideas aside from antibiotic use.
What what potential are you thinking in terms of creating more biodiversity in the gut as kind of a natural checks and balances?
Right. So something I'm a big proponent of course, is a probiotic and coming up with different options. If we can encapsulate poop and give it to you to change your microbiome, there are many options out there besides fecal matter. We can talk about different oils, essential oils that were here long before we were, different plants, different, different things that we can eat, different ways that we can change our lifestyles in order to keep our own microbes in check. And I know that your book, I read your book, was great, and, discussed a lot of those kind of topics about making sure your diet and really paying attention to your own symptoms and how you're feeling, and when you're traveling, different things you can do to eat and drink, and really be paying attention to that to keep your own microbiota in check so that it's doing the work for you and we're not relying on going to see the doctor, getting an antibiotic, and trying to fix something that way.
Okay. When people are taking antibiotics and you're suggesting that they take probiotics, which ones are good to take? You see some that are really expensive that have a lot of promises and others that are really cheap. And then, of course, the expensive ones say, well, if you take the cheap ones, they're all just going to be dissolved in your stomach acid. So
right.
I'm personally confused by it anyway.
I get it. And I won't say for any viewers, because I don't want to have any biases, but what I will say, I won't say what I use. Starts with a C. But what I do tell patients is that what you're looking for is something with good active live cultures. And you can buy very expensive probiotics out there that have multiple live cultures. And really, it's individual. It's how your body responds to those probiotics. I like a capsulated form, and I do like yogurt. And so we do have quite a bit of that on hand at our own house, but not everybody can eat yogurt. Some people are lactose intolerant. Some people, they'll say, well, I have bad gas, or that I don't care for the taste, or, whatever the excuse might be to not take a probiotic. And so what you want to do is look for live active cultures. And the reason you want them to be live and active is because they're naturally doing their job already in that product that you're consuming. And so when you introduce those often, and, some people it's daily, you just have to read the packaging to make sure you're taking it appropriately. But when you're introducing those organisms daily, anything that might be destroyed by your stomach and by your regular intestinal movement is going to be replaced. And also, they will eventually colonize in your intestinal tract. So then some people say, well, Bunny, if I'm already colonized, why am I going out and still buying probiotics? Well, because we have natural things that come into our lives, like I have 2 children who bring home gastroenteritis from school, and they spread it around, and gift it to the rest of us in the house. So you do want to make sure you're still taking it as directed on the package, and you do want to make sure you're still replacing that. And then also, some people will, they might travel a lot and or have a different lifestyle that allows them to eat different foods often. And so we want to make sure that as we have other organisms and viruses and things that are introduced into our system, that those probiotics are in there constant and are helping us to defend our natural biome.
You mentioned before about having a diversified diet. Do you think, generally speaking, it's better to have more of a consistent diet or more varied, or is it just that you should kind of have the same kind of varied diet over time? Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
So
I would say varied diet over time. you really want to make sure that not only you're trying new things, because I've read before that your taste buds can, they'll change over time, right? And so you don't want to create an environment in your mouth that craves a certain substance, right? Or that you don't realize that you're consuming, let's say, sugar, your brain has been tricked into then now consuming a bunch of sugar. So keeping a nice varied diet and trying new things and really making sure you're getting the appropriate fruits and vegetables, you're getting the appropriate amount of protein, you're getting the carbohydrates you need, you're getting that good fat, because you still need to have all those things in your balanced diet. But keeping it varied not only is helpful so that it's not hard to maintain that sort of lifestyle, so that it's exciting for you to eat some of those foods and they taste great and something you haven't tried before, but also so that the organisms that are in your intestines and in your gut, they don't get accustomed to the different macromolecules that you're putting in there. So you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. How would they get accustomed to it? Can you give me an example? Like if you're having oatmeal every morning or...
Right. So if you're constantly putting in, let's say, the same chain of carbohydrates and fatty acids and sugars, okay, they eventually, just by the way organisms work, they can work as a group and they can work individually. And so they take their cues of their daily living by different chemicals that we introduce into our bodies, by different environmental factors, like let's say temperature. Okay. And so if we're constantly giving them the same sugars and carbohydrates and those different molecules, they will take that as a chemical cue and start turning off or turning on genes that they need in order to keep on functioning and surviving.
Okay, so they're adapting a little too well and maybe using it for their own ends instead of for the good of the community.
Right, correct. And so think of it like, let's say, you're not feeling too great, but instead of maybe listening to those cues your body is giving you, you decide to keep on, eating junk food that day. Okay. And so instead of helping fuel the good bacteria, you're just putting some junk in, you're going to get junk out. And so you really want to make sure that you're paying attention to those kind of symptoms in your own body and your own body language to try to make sure that you're feeding them what they need so that they don't get that chemical signal or that environmental signal and turn on genes in order to keep, whatever it is, reproducing, producing a toxin, whatever that might be to them.
Can you take a shot of Jaeger to punish them and keep them on their toes?
I say you just take a shot of Jaeger because it tastes good.
Okay.
But yes, that's funny you say that. My mom always used to tell us, even when we were children, a shot of blackberry brandy will clear that cold right up. Now, she never gave us that blackberry brandy, but I always used to think that was bizarre, that was her cure-all, was blackberry brandy. So next podcast, that's what we'll talk about.
Sounds good. No, I was just wondering about some of those, digestive liqueurs, if that wasn't potentially one of the functions, was just to kind of, give the gut flora a little bit of a scramble so they couldn't really dig their hooks in and set up shop too much.
And there is actually, I know I just joked about it, but there is actual merit behind taking a GI cocktail, and really making sure that you just, every now and again, you're having a good flush of your system. I know that some medical practitioners do not think that you should ever do any sort of fasting or any sort of cleansing, but if you have normal good immunity, you are, like I said, up to date on your vaccines, you exercise daily, you have a good diet, a cleanse like that never hurts anything.
What are the arguments for not fasting? Is it because it will drop the immune system temporarily? Is that
right? So a lot of I don't want to say a lot, but there are medical professionals who feel that it's a drop in immunity, it's a drop in daily essentials of different vitamins and minerals, things that you need. And like I said, cleansing isn't for everybody. It's something that you need to be prepared for, that you need to be already in good health for. And it's not recommended for people that are immunocompromised or, might have some underlying medical issues.
Okay. And then for everyone else, if they're in moderately good health, what kind of influence does that have on the gut microbiome?
Right. So it's definitely gives it a change, and there's nothing wrong with a good change up. And, when we're talking about normal microflora in our gut or even on our skin or anywhere really in our body, we want to make sure that it's changing as we're changing. And so when your lifestyle changes, it's not bad to have a cleanse and really make sure that, like I said, you're paying attention to some of those cues. So a good example would be if you have recently been through some, a traumatic experience. Okay, that actually is a great time for a cleanse. Mm. The signals that your brain is sending to your gut are negative. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's really, that would be an excellent time for a cleanse in order to sort of get some of that negativity out, get some of those organisms that are opportunistic, that are starting to take opportunity there, and to get rid of them out of your system.
So during those times of high stress or a traumatic event, then there will be such significant changes to the stress hormones that'll affect the gut flora during that time. So rather than letting them set up shop and maybe take advantage opportunistically of a bad situation, you're thinking just starve them during that time so that they can't take the advantage.
Right. And it's, like I said, it's not for everybody, because sometimes during stressful situations, some people wouldn't be able to tolerate a cleanse. But that's a good example that I thought of right off the top of my head. And that's exactly what you're looking for, is to get rid of some of those bacteria that are taking chemical signals from your body, or, like I said, those environmental chemical cues, and they're using them to be opportunistic. And the rest of our other microbiota can be really sluggish sometimes and not always get the cue that they need to be working for you and helping to get rid of those other bacteria that are going to be harmful. And so cleanses are, like I said, in my own healthcare opinion, are good for people in the right setting. And they also need to make sure that they're not cleansing all the time. And often, because you do have to be paying attention to your vitamins, your minerals, like I said, some of those macromolecules that you have to have in order to keep a normal, healthy gut.
What's a good way for people to start with that? Do you have them start kind of intermittent or, Lent? I don't know.
Well, you know what? Today is Good Friday. We did just, we are finishing up Lent. I guess actually that's a great way to put it, that it's something that, of course, we discuss, and making sure that they don't already have some underlying disease or other underlying symptoms, that even fasting for a day or a cleanse, not even necessarily just a straight fast, but a cleanse. So we make sure that they're medically stable, that they're physically fit enough to handle that, and then talk about the different options. Now, usually at this juncture with a patient, I have them speak with the dietitian. So I'm not necessarily the best person to speak with about the actual process, but the dietitian usually recommends different cleanses according to their needs.
What would you define a cleanse as? Is that only having vegetable juice or eating clay? I'm not sure.
Boy. I hope not clay.
Okay.
No,
People do it. I
I
don't
was
know.
supposed to say some people do consume clay. Um, I think the cleanse I think you have to look at it more of a whole, and it's about consuming certain vitamins, minerals, different macromolecules that they need, or that they might not have a lot of. So sometimes it depends on blood testing. If you have, a panel drawn, and let's say you're low on, I don't know, magnesium. Okay, so a cleanse doesn't necessarily have to be just vegetable juice or something. It can be just making sure that we're using the right sort of fluids that are filled with the appropriate electrolytes that you need.
Mm.
So, and there's different forms of cleanse. There's TPNs. There's, of course, like
What?
yeah, it's a total food source. And a lot of people that are very ill will have them through a feeding tube, but there are things on the market that provide that and call it a cleanse. I'm trying to think of some that you can purchase. I know that there's tons. Right now, if we Googled cleansing, that you can buy kits. You can buy cleansing kits that would be filled with material that you would just drink.
I'm just suspicious of some of them. That's why I'm curious how you would define it, because some appear to be, maybe it's like a multivitamin and psyllium husk. And, others say, okay, you're going to have green apples or citrus fruit for this amount of time. And honestly, I would be afraid to embark on any one of these.
Right. So, like I said, I am definitely not the expert in this field, and the dietitian is, and the cleanse is only used, like I said, when it's necessary for the patient, when they have such extreme gastrointestinal issues that they need to be wiped clean. And we do not do that before a fecal transplant. So, but a cleanse, in my opinion, when we're talking about gut microbiota, is more of something that's introducing appropriate nutrients that you still need to have without actually having to consume a lot of calories. Does that make sense to what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm curious what your position is on not doing a cleanse or not fasting before a fecal transplant, because I've seen websites that recommend the opposite. They're obviously not done by people with a medical background, so I think it would be valuable for people to, get your take on that.
Right. So what we do is make sure that the patient has had a bowel movement, so that their rectal vault is open, because like I said, we do use a Foley catheter to insert that material. But we don't have them cleanse or fast beforehand, just because we still want to make sure that they're eating, so that we want to make sure that they're still getting enough nutrients throughout the day in order to actually have the procedure done. The procedure is very minimally invasive. Like I said, it's just that Foley catheter. It's a very small catheter. But as long as their colon is empty and their rectal vault is open, then there's no need to have them change their diet at that day that they have the procedure done.
You mentioned before that fasting can cause a temporary dip to the immune system. Is this potentially dangerous with the fecal transplant, or is it just more about making sure that their energy levels are high enough to go through with the procedure and have it stick?
Yeah, it's just really about making sure that they have high enough energy levels, that their body, like I said earlier, I've never had a patient that's had an adverse reaction to the transplant, but part of it is just to make sure they don't have an adverse reaction. We are, even though it is the the fecal material that we're using has been screened by a facility, we are introducing strange material into your body. And so we do want to make sure that you don't have any reactions, that you're able to, after we instill it and you hold it for that hour, that you're able to rid it of your body without any sort of problems. And so, like I said, we don't recommend any fasting or cleansing ahead of time before. Like I said, we just make sure that they've used the restroom.
When it comes to these fecal donors, is there any way to know anything about them? I mean, obviously with sperm donors, you know exact height and hair color and all of that. I'm just curious who these people are that are making the donations.
Right. So actually, if you go online, I think you can Google, like, I want to be a fecal transplant donor. I'm not joking. I think you really can. Mm-hmm. And there are sites, especially in different parts of the nation, and I know up in Canada, that you go in and they screen you. They screen you based on your diet, your exercise, your water consumption, and then they will take the sample and screen it. And of course, you give them permission to screen it for bloodborne pathogens and any other GI pathogens.
It also seems, every time I've treated colitis before and it's gone well, then if it's a woman, she says, you now treat my son's colitis. It tends to, because people are eating the same kind of things, they're going through the same emotional traumas at the same periods of their life. So I imagine that can also be tricky when looking to family members to find a family member who's a close relative, but also somebody who's significantly better off than you are. Because it seems like, I just notice where I put on fat tends to be where, people on my mom's side tend to put on fat in the same kind of areas. So,
yeah. Oh, exactly. I think that to myself when I see my aunts, and I think, yep, that's exactly how I'm feeling. Things are, starting to look like they do. And, but that is true that family members, and it's also difficult because family members still need to be screened just like any other donor. And so you do have to find, first off, willing family members. And they're not always the best choice because, like you said, they're going through the same traumas, or they're experiencing the same stress, or they're eating the same diets, or they have the same exercise habits and the same lifestyle choices. And so getting fecal matter from a fecal transplant bank isn't necessarily a poor choice.
So it seems the verdict from her experience is that this is brilliant for colitis, but the hopes I may have had for this being a cure-all for problems of the gut-brain axis will need to chill for a little bit. Real life doesn't always work out as simply as we might like. In the meantime, if you want to discover more about how to cultivate your gut garden, check out our book, Enlighten Weight, Cultivate the Garden Within on Amazon. It details how to combine plant flavors found within your kitchen to cultivate gut microbiota. It also goes into gasotransmitters and how to move and breathe in order to heal your body. We put a lot into it, and we hope you get a lot out of it. Remember to rate the podcast, review it, take a screenshot, and send it to us at botanicalbiohacking@gmail.com. Every month we do a drawing for herbal prizes. Some of the prizes are causing our clinic to get backordered. I thought people might get a kick out of it. I didn't expect people to start using the herbs in their clinics and telling others about it as well. So thank you for everyone who's spreading the word. We got some investors and an import license, so we won't have these kind of backorder challenges in the future. Knock on wood. Also, keep those reviews coming because at the end of the year, we're going to invite one of you to come take a trip with us to Sichuan and see the herb growing fields in person, meet the farmers, and have a great time. And come to think of it, we may be taking more trips more often than we thought. I'm working on an exciting project with an MD anesthesiologist and Zen master to help with some medical tourism for entrepreneurs. As high as 30% of people in service industry and entrepreneurs, business owners who are in that startup phase, get burnt out. It's just what happens when you're working 17 hours a day, weeks on end without a break. This inflammation in the brain literally shuts down brain function. You can actually see it on a PET scan as the brain becomes dimmer over time because The brain cells are actually dying. Well, we've developed a program to replicate the work that we've been doing here in Albuquerque, which is a combination of Chinese and Western medicine, as well as mindfulness practices to help regrow this brain tissue, to literally rewire yourself for happiness and success. I'm really excited about this project, and we will touch on it more in future episodes. Some of the ideas from this are very useful for all of us, no matter if we've just got back from vacation or if we're in the middle of one of the larger projects in our lives. This is just crucial information, and we want it to be out there. So can't thank you all enough for spreading the word. Podcast is growing exponentially. We're getting great questions, and being able to connect with so many wonderful people through this medium has been such a blessing. So again, thank you.